See, if you are starting your career, my strong recommendation would be to focus on learning. Don't focus on money. Don't focus on role or seniority or anything like that. Learn the tricks of the trade. That is, if you're not enjoying your work, you'll end up being an average performer. That is absolutely one thing. The other thing is, as I said, initiative. I have seen people who will never say no. That I will not chase tools. I will not chase technologies, but I will try to understand the fundamentals. I will focus more on the architecture.
AI and data are everywhere today, but understanding how they actually shape products, technology, and business decisions requires learning from the people who lead at the highest level. That's exactly what Coding Ninja 10x Club members experienced in this exclusive fireside chat, where we are joined by Dr. Shakti Goel, CTO and Chief Data Scientist at Yatra.com, who brings deep experience in building, scaling, and applying AI-driven systems in the real world. From strategic decision-making to the evolving role of AI, technology, and data in organizations, this conversation goes beyond theory and into what truly matters for professionals building careers in this space. What you are about to watch is a glimpse of the industry access, leadership insights, and practical exposure that Coding Ninja 10x Club offers to its members. So, Sir is currently the CTO and Chief Data Scientist at Yatra.com, and with over 25 years of experience. So, Sir, a lot of people have this thing that when we are starting our career in data or development, there's a lot of confusion of where to begin, how to start, how to compete. So, looking back at your own early years, what helped you build confidence in your skills early on, and how did you start this road to where you are today?
So, Supritam, that's actually a great question. A lot of people, contact me as to what they should do, in the field of data. There are multiple roles that an individual can play. I can come to those roles, but I'll tell you about my history. My PhD involved a lot of data elements. I did a lot of analytics, and the PhD was around understanding how the smog is formed in the Los Angeles basin. And for that, I had to deal with large emission inventories. And we are talking about 16 gigabytes of file in mid-90s, 93, 94, 95 kind of time frame, when Windows 3.1 had not even come out, So, and if you wanted to buy a desktop, it would come with either no disk, or you would have to put an artificial external disk, and it would not be more than 120 MB. So that's the scale I'm talking about. And all this research was done on Cray C90, which was a supercomputer of that time. Now, what this did was, I was able to handle large volumes of data. I was able to process large data files. And this data was an input into a climate model. And the climate model would take 5 to 10 minutes to run. The output, how to make sense out of it, and then using tools like Statistica, Mathematica, how to draw a three-dimensional plot where GPS was involved, GPS to identify where the emissions are coming from. That actually gave me a lot of confidence. Now, once I finished my PhD, I realized I don't want to continue in chemical engineering. So I joined a data analytics company. At the time, the concept of data warehousing had just come out. And I was fortunate to work on a 10 terabyte data warehouse. And this was a time when 1 terabyte would cost almost $500,000. It was very expensive. And this was probably the second or the third largest data warehouse in the world. So when I went there, I joined the company as a data modeler. I was given training. Then I migrated to being a data engineer, wrote some very complex SQLs. Then I implemented some front-end business user tools and at that time, the concept of relational online analytical processing was introduced. There was a tool called MicroStrategy that came out. So the reason I'm saying all this is that I had a chance to start my career by playing with data. So that was during my PhD time. And then my very first job, I got training to work in a very exciting field. So if people want to go into this area, they should see what is it that they like to do. Do they like to do data modeling? Do they like being a DBA, a database administrator? Do they like data engineering. And data engineering means, do they want to write complex SQL statements, do data analytics, and do they want to be a business analyst, or do you want to write some ETL, extraction, transformation, loading? There are quite a few roles. And then these roles actually migrate into whether you want to be a data scientist or a machine learning engineer or a DevOps or MLOps engineer. This is something that people have to understand and identify. Do they want to be technical? Do they want to be, a business oriented? So, of course, I had no idea what I wanted to do, but, with the flow of time, with the flow of projects, I kind of decided that I want to be a master of everything in like data warehousing, and that's what I did for a very long time. So, like my suggestion would be that, see, what is it that you like to do? Do you like to analyze data, or do you like to do engineering on data?
So, but the one thing was amazing is your journey. You said when there was Windows 3.1 was also not there, and right now we have super LLMs coming up. So a big change, you have seen the complete journey. So you have worked across different setups like HCL Infosystems, Akash Education, and also two travel tech companies currently at Yatra.com. So just in addition to the previous question that, okay, we now know where to start, but a lot of people when joining companies in the initial years, they have three options in mind. They have this thought, brand, the role, or the learning that they'll get. So according to you, which is more important and how will you prioritize these three things?
See, if you are starting your career, my strong recommendation would be to focus on learning. Don't focus on money. Don't focus on role or seniority or anything like that. Learn the tricks of the trade. That is the number one. Try different technology. Try being a software developer, software engineer. Maybe, you think that you like data. Maybe you think that you want to be a data analytics person. But maybe it is software engineering that you enjoy. Maybe it is like developing applications. And now, maybe you may want to use tools like Cursor, and use large language models to write code. And what you want to ultimately do is become a product person. You want to develop a final piece of engineering that you can sell to your customers, right? So why waste or invest time in being an engineering, like a software engineer when like LLMs can do that for you? So try different things. I'll give an example, an analogy. When I was doing training, my internship training when I was in college. So I joined a company called Britannia Industries. It's the same company that makes bread, cake, biscuits, and all that, right? So I went to that factory for around 3 months, and I had 2 weeks of training in different departments. I went to manufacturing, I went to accounting, I went to transportation, logistics. I sat down with senior management. That way I understand, how an industry works. So if you want to get into technology, understand how technology works. If you want to be in AI, understand how AI works. AI on its own doesn't mean much, unless it is strongly coupled with software engineering like APIs and all that, and with clean data. And always remember that technology in itself will not work unless it is backed by strong business processes. If the business process is weak, no matter how good your technology is, it's not going to work. So these are the things that you have to learn. The other thing that that we don't focus much in India, and I think we should start focusing, is on soft skills, right? You have been in a college, you have taken courses, you got grades, you are excellent in your field, but can you give a good presentation? Can you speak in front of an audience of 20 people? Can you communicate your thoughts? This is also what you have to learn. As you grow in your career, these soft skills will become much more important than your other technical skills.
So you said you worked at Britannia, you were working with different departments also. And in current market, when we see that, as you correctly mentioned, the AI is doing everything, a lot of things which the easier tasks. So in today's time, should people in their early careers or their middle careers, they should develop a deep expertise in just one role, or they should gradually broaden their skills across multiple areas going forward?
See, I personally feel that you should have a general idea of the field you're working in. So your role should be broad, but within that field, you should try to specialize in one particular area. And with the advent of AI, you don't know what is it that the AI will take over, right? If the AI, like there are people who are data entry operators who do receipt analysis, now AI is doing all that. So what will they do, right? So it is very important to understand, to have an experience in multiple areas. So be a data modeler, be a data engineer, write complex SQL, do data analysis, work with business people, right? Do all those things. But right, so or if you've chosen a field of, let's say, data analytics, data sciences, then you can say, okay, I want to be a data modeler. I want to work with business analysts and like build a logical model, build a conceptual model. Then I want to understand where the data is coming from. So I want to follow the whole data lineage. I want to understand what data governance is. I want to follow the extraction, transformation, and loading of data, moving it from the source to the target. So all these things you have to understand. See, one thing that LLM will do is, or Gen AI, they will generate the code for you. But what code needs to be generated, that is what you have to tell it, right? So understand. So I would say, to answer your question, try to be a generalist in some ways, but be a deep expert in one, or like outside data. If I take an example from the medical sciences, right? The LLMs can very well predict your diagnosis. But if you become an expert, if you are a neurosurgeon and you have become a real expert in there, then LLMs still cannot replace you, and they will not be able to replace you for a long time. Think like that. Yeah.
So a very beautiful example that you gave. And this is right of fear in every one of us, mostly that AI is going to replace our jobs or AI is going to take everything. But your example has correctly proved that how that domain expertise and your human thinking can never be replaced by AI going ahead.
That's right. Yeah.
So one of the the difficult things that our generation or the our age group faces is that many developers and analysts, they feel stuck doing repetitive work at some company. They get kind of bored and they think that, okay, no, this now I need to skip this. So from your experience leading teams for more than 20 years, so what helps people break out of this phase, and what should they do while they face such kind of stigma in their head?
Sure. I think I would say it is the initiative. The person has to take a self-initiative. You could have the boss you have is not under your control, but generally managers, the bosses, they will want you to grow, and they would provide all sorts of opportunities. But it's the initiative that has to come from you. And I'll give you an example. I hire a lot of interns, right? And I've got some really smart interns from IIIT Vadodara. We have a tie-up. Yatra has a tie-up with that institution. So they come here and they have learned things in computer sciences. So they know how to use React.js, they know how to build backend using Node, full stack engineers, but they don't have much experience in let's say machine learning or in LLM. That's where I come in. I teach them. I give a chance, So it will be great if someone can open the door for you, right? But remember one thing, in the industry, unlike colleges, unlike academia, no one is going to spoon feed you. No one is going to say HR and all. They will not come and hold your hands and say, okay, sit here, you have a class and work on this project. That initiative has to come from you, right? So I'll also give you an example of a senior manager. She has around 13 to 15 years of experience in my team. She's an excellent PHP developer, application developer. She came to me and said that, sir, you also handle AI data sciences. I want to move into AI. That is the initiative. And I know that since she's a smart person, I said, I had no problems. I said, you go and lead the AI and data practice in my team, right? So this is the way to break the mold. Otherwise, what happens in industries is that you get bucketed. If you have been hired as a software developer, there is a budget for software development. People will expect you to do that all your life. But now there are just so many resources out there, right? The internet is full of things. There are LLMs now. You can use all these resources to learn a new skill and then move in that direction. So, but the initiative has to come from you. Yeah.
So I think initiative driven is one of the biggest points, and my next question was also related to this. That
Mhm.
I think this is one of the point that a good performer should have. So what does separate average performers from the good performers in their growing years?
Mhm. So I recently had an intern, and she has done, I think, BCA or MCA or something. But whatever project I gave her, she was not able to do that. And if I say, okay, now make this change, and she would think that, oh my God, now I have to change the whole application or do the whole thing. Where does that feeling come from? That feeling comes from the fact that she was kind of forced into this area, or she felt that this is an area I want to be in, but maybe that's not the right area for her. Right? This is one thing. So if if you're not enjoying your work, you'll end up being an average performer. That is absolutely one thing. The other thing is, as I said, initiative. I have seen people who will never say no, no matter how much work I give them. Depending on the needs of the company, they will never say no. They will work, and then they learn things. I'll give an example of another intern. This person, he came, and he was very fresh. He's a computer science graduate, but he learned everything about databases. We built an application called Recap for expense management. He designed the entire database. Then he said, I want to learn LLMs and AI. So he used LLMs and he integrated those in Recap. This was 2 years ago when no one even knew how to do that, right? So he was doing it. Now he's the most soft. Now he's like, he has only 1.5 years of experience, but he's the most sought after person in the company when it comes to training of that application or understanding, or like paying a client visit. And one thing he made sure was that his communication skills were strong. Like, he's amazing when he speaks. So all these things, having soft skills, having the initiative, the drive, the intelligence, the diligence, the hunger, if you put all these things together, you will definitely stand out.
And I think standing out, like everyone wants to stand out in today's time, but
Yeah.
there are lakhs and lakhs of people coming. As I was currently seeing, there's 30 lakh engineers coming out every year. So that's the number that we have. So I think skills matter a lot when it comes to being also a good performer and an average performer. So like freshers right now in both data or the development field, they are often chasing the tools and trends that's coming up, and AI is very overhyped right now. So in your experience, what are those fundamentals that should never be ignored? And no matter how tools become advanced or AI becomes advanced, what are those fundamentals that everyone should have or everyone should be strong in to stand out in this landscape?
Absolutely. That's an excellent question. And one thing that I decided early on in my career, it has helped me, is that I will not chase tools. I will not chase technologies, but I will try to understand the fundamentals. I will focus more on the architecture. When you're building a house, houses have been built for centuries, right? That has not changed. There are walls, there are ceilings, and all that. So there is a fundamental way of doing things. If I want to build, so the one thing I always focus on would be the design principle. Now the method of building those houses has changed, but the house always needs a foundation. It needs a roof, it needs walls. So that is never going to change. If I want to build a data warehouse or an analytic system, I need a logical data model, I need a physical data model, I need to design the ETL strategies. So that is the design part. Now, how do I implement it? I can use tools like Informatica, Ab Initio. These are ETL tools, and I can become a tool expert. But then what happens? After 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, a new tool comes out, and then your skills become obsolete. But if you are an architect, if you understand the design principle, you will always stay in fashion. You'll always be in demand. So these are the things I would say that, don't chase tools. Understand how tools work. I was hiring someone for a position of a data warehouse architect, and he was explaining to me how Azure Microsoft technology works, and how you can build systems and how you can move data around. I said, that is a physical solution. But when you're going to talk to your stakeholder customer, and the customer is saying, I'm worried that my revenue is dropping, you're not going to explain that Azure system. You have to explain, what's in data and how you're going to use that data to build a solution system that will help that stakeholder. See what I'm saying? So it is absolutely important to understand the design principles and try to understand the domain, the business domain that you work in. Sure. If you have these two, then I think your skills, will always be in demand. They will be with you throughout your life. If you understand the domain today, you could be a business analyst tomorrow. You can be a portfolio manager. Why not? Yeah.
So in previously also you mentioned that communication skills has to be, or soft skills are very important also. Yeah. So beyond the technical skills, how can data analysts train themselves to ask firstly better questions or the storytelling part, and also how can they define the problems clearly when they're talking to the stakeholders out there?
Right. See, that's a thing that no one can teach you in school, right? You have to learn on the job. So there can be two kinds of analysts. One is a data analyst and one is a business analyst. A data analyst should be joined at the hips, with a business analyst. What I mean is they have to work very closely. They have to understand, how these analysts, the analysts have to understand what the business is asking for. There was a time, when 80% of the analytic systems would fail because they were developed by IT and there was no input from the business. So try to understand the business, try to understand, as an example I gave you, my revenue is falling. Should I boil the ocean and try to look for everything, or should I start asking questions? Well, let's see. Is there a customer churn? Are your customers leaving you? Have you introduced a product that is not selling? Was there a catastrophe or was there a climatic change because of things are not selling? For example, the soft drinks did not do very well last summer because the summer was not very hot, right? So the sales dropped. What could you do in this scenario? Can you preempt this? Ask a lot of whys. How I can do things, why did this happen? That insight, that you need to have an analytic frame of mind to be able to asking these questions, right? How to write SQL, how to build a data warehouse, how to populate a table, how to do a physical database design, that can be taught to you, right? But what is this data that I need, which will help me calculate the churn of customers, or which will help me calculate the lifetime value of our customers? Where can I get this information from? That is what the data analyst and business analyst should focus on.
Great, sir. And thank you so much for this insight, because this is why we have the CXO Cafe sessions, because from your experience,
all this is from experience. Yeah, I'm telling you all from my experience. When I was a fresher, I used to think, I wrote an SQL statement and it ran in 20 minutes and I'm getting these great results. But then my business counterpart, who was much senior to me, said, but this is not what I'm looking for. So you can put in all the effort, in the world. But if it's not answering the business query, then all your effort will go waste. Yeah.
True, sir. True. So in this call, we have both data analysts and full stack developers with us. And in today's time, we are seeing every company or every product is first of all data heavy and also needs the technical or the coding part of it. So according to your experiences at FASN, TBO, Yatra also, where you're handling both as a CTO and Chief Data Scientist, how can developers and analysts work together to give a better result, and what skill is required for both of them so that they can mutually work on something?
Yeah. See, when you build application, whether it's a software application, data analytics system, there is a concept of JAD session, JAD. JAD stands for Joint Application Design. Why is it called joint? Because here the technical team works jointly with the business team to first lay out the requirements, right? So when you're building this application, and this is where the developers, the technical folks, and the analysts here, you mentioned the business analysts and data analysts, they all need to come together, and they need to sit with the business folks, who could be like manager, senior manager, director, or the head of that division, to understand their perspective. And then you should be able to separate wheat from chaff, right? What is it that people think they need and what is it they actually need? What is it that people think is happening in the company and what does the data tell you? You need to analyze reports, you need to analyze data, and then you come up with a common plan. This cannot happen in isolation. This, a business analyst cannot do it on his or her own, and neither can a developer. They have to come together, and that is a skill to analyze business requirements, or from there build a conceptual model of data. Right. So if I want to analyze something, then a transaction is created. That is how you should be able to logically separate out data and then put that back together. And this is how, as the data increases. So what is big data? Big data is defined by 4 or 5 V's. There is velocity, the speed at which the data is generated, the volume, the variety, and the value that is in that data. You have to work with a business analyst to understand what that data is that they need. The other thing is definition of a term. Let's say sale. The business analyst would want to build a dashboard, and it's a sales dashboard. How is sales defined? Right? If you were to come to the industry, you may realize that the marketing team may have one definition of sale. The manufacturing team may say, hey, I have developed my product, I have built the product. So in my opinion, this product is going to sell. So whatever is the value of that product is the sale, even though the product may not have sold. Finance department may say that, look, the product that has sold and invoice has been generated. Then it's considered to be a sale. The sales team may say that, look, I have taken the purchase orders, I've taken the orders from the customer, so my job is done. But if you make a booking of an order, that is not a sale. See what I'm saying? So you have to come up with a common definition. There's a concept of data rationalization. You need to come with definitions of terms of KPIs, key performance indicators, that are valid throughout the company. And this has to be done jointly by the business analyst and the developer. So more the data, more the number of KPIs, more the definitions you want to build. I just gave you a very simple one because I see that every time in every company. But depending on the industry you are, there can be different KPIs and there can be different definitions for it, right? So building the application together and then coming up with these definitions together, that I think is where I think the two have to work closely.
So all full stack developers and data analysts in this call.
Sorry, that's a long answer.
But I think it was very valuable for them because, we have two cohorts here and they always, when they interact also, I think this is going to help them going forward.
Yeah, definitely. I think like if you're a developer, if you're a software engineer, always try to understand why you are building what you are building, right? Don't build a Mercedes car and then put the tires of a tractor in it. The whole thing has to come out beautiful. That's the message I want to convey. Yeah.
So, sir, our next set of questions is completely on the most overhyped thing or the trending thing right now, AI, and how to grow in this AI world. So at Yatra also you have built GenAI products in production. So for early professionals, as we talked earlier, that fundamental knowledge is necessary. But what's the right way to use AI tools so they learn faster, but not skip the fundamentals doing this?
Right. You have to know when to use AI, what AI to use. This AI is a very generic term, right? Data analytics, data sciences could be AI. Machine learning is AI. What we think of AI in today's term is actually generative AI, chat GPT kind of thing. That's what we think is AI. But AI is there everywhere. If you have a self-driving car, that is also AI, right? And here we're not using large language model. Robotics is AI, and we are not using large language model. So to answer that question, let's see. You want to use AI in building applications, but you don't want to become a tool expert. See, once again, what you should do is, as a developer, first lay out the problem, understand the problem. And I'll give you an example. Let's say we have recently developed an expense management solution for our businesses. So I want to build an expense management solution because the requirement is that when my employees travel and they incur expenses, they have to file those expenses and then get reimbursed, right? So let's say that's a problem statement. Now, how do I use AI in it? I will not jump to AI. I will first write the pseudocode. I will say, okay, my form to file expenses will look like this. This is what my PHP or Java or Node.js or React, whatever you are using. This is what my pseudocode in that language is going to look out. Then I'm going to look at that code, stare at that code and say, I want to solve this problem. And this problem is that a customer is uploading a receipt. Can I automatically scan the receipt and populate the fields of the form? Can I extract the date of expense, the name of the merchant, the city, and the different line items on it, and then auto-populate it? One way is to read the receipt and then manually type in. The other way is to do OCR, optical character recognition, which is a form of machine learning, and read the receipt and then automatically populate it. That is where my first interaction with AI comes in. Now I have to use OCR, let's say. Should I build my own OCR? Should I train my own model? If I want to train my own model, what technology am I going to use? And so there's, for image analysis, there is convoluted neural networks, CNN, let's say. Am I going to do that? But for that, I need millions of receipts, right? Before I can train my OCR, where will I get all this information from? Okay, then I go and start searching. Maybe Google has those APIs or Amazon has the API, Microsoft has it. Can I use that API? This is how you need to start thinking. So the architecture has to demand the use of AI, and then you decide what AI to use. Or for example, you may want to make a classification of an image, and it say use random forest. You ask around, you do search, you say use random forest algorithm. You do research on it. Don't take it ad verbatim, don't just assume you have to use the random forest. Do some research and you may find gradient boost is a better example here. By doing so, you have done a lot of research and you have understood what these algorithms are, and you have understood the business problem and you are able to marry the two. This is the way to go around doing things. And then you can say, oh, you know what, of course, I don't want to write the code behind random forest. There are libraries out there. There's PyTorch, there's scikit-learn, there is H2O, and I can use those libraries. That's fine, right? So that is the physical side of it. That is now you're implementing the solution. But how did you arrive at the solution? You had to go through a lot of logical thinking, and that is a must. Otherwise, you will end up being a tool person. Yeah.
So talking about tools also and AI, because in today's time, knowledge is democratized. Everyone has access to knowledge, and a lot of ChatGPT also suggests as the project what you should do. And when in today's time, portfolios are very important. How can our attendees or all the youth who want to stand out, they can clearly show their problem solving and solutioning skills rather than just that they can use that tool? So how can they show this, and what kind of projects they should do to do so?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. You might have heard of AI agents and agentic AI. The project you can work on is orchestration of agentic AI. So if I want to make a flight booking, how can I go all the way from the search to making the payments? I can have different agents. One agent can do search for flights, the other one can do booking, the third one can email me the ticket. How do I bring everything together, and how do I do it through agentic AI? What APIs to call? That is something that you have to decide, right? As a developer, as a human being. That's where the human in the loop is needed. Now, but the technology you are using is AI, right? See what I'm saying? So you have made the design is coming from you, the architecture is coming from you, what needs to be done is coming from you. And then after you decided all that, you are using agentic AI. The other thing is, using edge cases. Like there's something called guardrails, because these LLMs can get confused and they can start giving wrong results. They may give results you may not even want to show. So there's something called guardrails. You tell LLM that you are supposed to do this and you're not supposed to do this. This is something that you have to identify and design. The other thing is that about planning. Come up with a plan. That plan will be yours. Okay? But you can take the help of AI to say, is this plan foolproof? There is a company, I was reading about it. It's using AI in the construction industry. It says that, you have designed the house and everything, and you have bought these taps, faucets. And, but in your design, there's no place to use that faucet. You have not done the plumbing. I don't see any plumbing in your design. And people can forget it because the way things move is very fast. That's where AI can come and say that your plan is excellent, but here is the fault. Right? But then who created the plan? It's you who created it. That's where you are important. But use AI as an assistant to take it forward.
It's, so I think one of the another good advice that consider AI as your assistant and not someone who can take you over. And this is the major fear that everyone is having today.
Yeah, that's right. See, if you use AI for everything, LLM for everything, then you will realize that your brain is no longer sharp. You will really feel dumb. I'm telling you, that happens. Yeah.
Okay, so looking ahead, and as we are seeing, like as we said now that every night we sleep and the next day we wake up, there are numerous updates and changes in today's time. So over the next few years, what skills do you think that or skills or specific tools that analysts and developers should have so that they don't become obsolete or they are able to stand out?
Yeah. That's an excellent question. This anxiety, this fear of job losses. What is it I should do now? I'll give you an example. There was an article I was reading that top MBA graduates in the US, from Harvard, MIT, Stanford, they were not finding jobs in the investment banking industry. Why? Investment banking requires a lot of documentation. Now you don't need people to write those documentation. LLMs are doing it for you. But people didn't realize that this was going to happen. So, what the skills that you should have to get back to your question is domain expertise. Understand how your business works. Those nuances, those little things, AI will not know. AI will not know how your business, your company runs. Only you know that. And that will make you valuable. The other thing is, as AI improves, and now the laws are coming up like Digital Privacy Data Protection Act, the GDPR laws in Europe, which will try to protect your data. Okay? So what is ethical? What is allowed? What is not allowed? That AI cannot do. AI is something which has no ethics. You understand that, right? AI is basically trained on data. It does not have a conscience. So this is something that a human being has to bring in. And there are roles that are coming around ethical AI. Then I would say that, LLMs can write software and all that. But who's going to curate the data? Right? AI ultimately runs on data. AI will not curate the data for you. If you build a RAG system, RAG, Retrieval Augmented Gen AI system, like the chatbots you see now, who is going to fix the data behind that? That is what you have to do, right? AI will not do that. And ultimately, the overall architecture, the design and all that, these are the skills we should have. And once again, I would say that focus it on understanding how things are built. What are the architectural designs? What are the underlying design principles? How an industry operates? That is, if you know that, then you can supplement AI, right? That like AI will do the job of a data operator, data entry person, but what to do with that data, that is what you decide.
So you mentioned in your previous, like when we were talking in the previous questions that you should have an expertise in a single field. You should be generalist. So just wanted a final take on this. That today, as we were talking, like AI are doing a lot of things, the minor tasks, but thinking behind that is important. So in the long run, what do you think? Who will win? Strong generalists who have an advantage, or a very specific specialist who is just into one role? Who is going to win in the long run in today's AI era?
It's actually difficult, and the reason is the way AI is moving. Right now we say that AI cannot be creative, it cannot think on its own. But models are coming up, and this is where super AI is getting introduced, that AI will start thinking also. So we don't know, what AI is going to do. But here, I would say that try to be both, if possible. Generalist in a way that if you're a generalist, then you can shift from one job to another if AI has like eaten your job. If AI has like taken over your job. But specialist is something, if you're a super specialist in an area, like example science, if you have become a doctor and if you're a specialist in very particular disease or like surgery, then I don't think AI is there yet to replace you. But who knows, 10 years down the road, it may be possible. Who knows that if like quantum computing becomes a reality, the LLMs that we see today will be like child's play. You will have much more sophisticated systems that can do things that human beings may not have even imagined. If that happens, right? So it's very difficult to predict, I would say, Supritam.
So before we move on to the fireside chat, the rapid fire round, which are a few fun questions, I have a last question for you. So, to summarize this whole fireside chat, and if you had to give final advice to everyone listening to this to stay ahead in today's AI era or the coming era ahead, so what would that be?
So I would say that, change is going to happen. You cannot stop changes. We are seeing the changes. It's a wowing factor. It shows things that no one has seen before. But changes have always been there. Like there was Web 1.0, where there was www 2.0. Now there is www 3.0, which is about blockchain, which is about edge computing and all. There is cloud 3.0. So changes were there, but we have not heard of these things. But AI has shown that changes are happening very fast. Right? Now, don't resist the change with the change. Right? And preempt the change if you can. One thing that you have to do is say AI is there, so you don't need to be an encyclopedia anymore. Earlier, people who had the knowledge were, respected or were valued. Now, AI is there to answer all your questions. But what will be the quality of response? That will be based on how you ask the question, what your words are, right? So learn how to ask questions, learn how to extract information from the system. That would be my one advice, Don't try to compete with AI.
So I think we got a lot of good and amazing advices and insights today. So before we move on to the questions, and we'll take, with your permission, if we can take questions from our learners.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
So we'll have a just quick rapid fire round.
Okay.
So the first question is one tool you secretly overuse.
I use all these ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude bots, which are there. Use them a lot.
One tech buzzword you'd happily retire forever.
The one is disruption. We hear a lot about disruption. I would like to replace it with resilience. What systems can you build that will be resilient?
Okay, so build from scratch or improve an existing system?
Depends. If it's an old archaic system, if it's a medical claim processing system built on mainframe using COBOL, you may want to replace that. But if it's something that was developed just a few years ago, I would enhance it.
True. Yeah. And one skill you wish everyone had in your team?
I tell my people, my folks, is about empathy. It's called data empathy. If you're looking at a record, if it's a claim record, right? And if there's a missing field, why is the field missing? Because something happened to the patient. Think like that. Give a human face to data.
Okay, and the last one from my side. So, one mistake you have made, but that taught you the most.
So initially, I wanted to be a perfectionist. Everything I do has to be perfect. My model has to be 98% accurate, but no. If my model is 85% accurate, but I get my result in 10 seconds as compared to 98% accurate, but wait for half an hour, then I would go for imperfection.
So I think the short rapid fire round also gave us a lot of insights, like how to go ahead with. Conversations like this are the heart of the Coding Ninjas 10x Club, where learners don't just study concepts but engage directly with leaders who are shaping the future of technology, innovation, and business. While many are still trying to keep up with the change, Coding Ninja learners are focused on thinking clearly, building real-world skills, and growing with confidence. If you are serious about creating impact in AI, data, and technology, click the link in the description below to join Coding Ninjas and be a part of a learning ecosystem built for the future.